Okay, guys, today you're going to learn about simple interest. You are going to write on your notebook, start a new page, and label it simple interest. At the top, I want you to put simple interest formula. You don't have to worry about putting the arrow. And then here is the formula. It's the letter I equals P times R times T. And we're going to spell out exactly what those mean. So go ahead and get that written down. If you need to pause the video, please do so. Okay, so in the simple interest formula, what you need to know about simple interest is that whenever money is borrowed or it's deposited, you can borrow money from somebody and sometimes they'll charge you what they call simple interest. There's a formula for figuring out exactly how much money would be charged. Or if you decided to save it and deposit it into a bank, the bank will pay you a certain amount. Okay, and it's based on the interest rate that's given, the amount that you start with, and the amount of time. So let's detail out exactly what all these letters up here mean. So interest, the letter I, stands for the amount of interest that is earned. And notice I put a dollar symbol behind that. And that's because the interest earned is actually a dollar amount. It's not a percent or anything like that. It's just the I in this case stands for the amount of interest that is earned. It's a dollar amount. The P in this case stands for principal amount. Principal amount is also a dollar. It's a dollar amount. It's the amount that you start with. And then the R in this case stands for interest rate. And notice I put as a percent. It's usually given to you as a percent. And we know that when we multiply percents by anything, we first have to convert that percent to a decimal. And then last in our formula is the T, and that stands for time. And since time can be measured in multiple ways, in this case, we want it to be measured in years. So we're going to do some quick definitions. Interest, I want you to write this as well. Interest is the amount of money that's earned based on the principal, the rate, and the time. Principal, now keep in mind, in this case, principal doesn't stand for our school principal. It actually stands for the original amount of money that is borrowed or deposited. So if we're borrowing money, it's the amount that we originally borrowed. If we're keeping it in the bank to earn more money, it's the original amount that we went to the bank with. Okay, and then there's rate. Our rate is our actual interest rate, and it is a percent. Notice I put in big, bold letters, and I want you to highlight it, underline it, do whatever you got to do, put it in all caps on your paper. You want to know that this must be converted to a decimal before we start multiplying. So in a word problem, our interest rate is going to be given to us as a percent. But when we actually plug it into the formula, we need to convert our percent to a decimal. Otherwise, we'll come up with a really big number and it won't be correct. Okay, and then last is the time. The time in our problems refers to the amount of time that money is borrowed or deposited. And again, since time can be measured in multiple ways, in this case, we're talking time is measured in years. So again, we have our formula. I stands for interest, the amount that's earned. How much money are we earning if we borrow, or how much money are we paying, or how much money are we paying if we borrow, how much are we earning if we deposit. Principal is the original amount. The rate is a percent, it's our interest rate, and remember we have to convert it to a decimal. And then there's time. The amount of time has to be in years, and if it's not, there's a way to convert it, and I'll show you that as we go along. Okay, so here we're given our first example, and our directions tell us to use a simple interest formula to find each of the missing values. So in our first problem, here it says find the missing value for the interest amount earned. And they tell us that P is $225. That means the original amount that we started with is $225. They tell us that our interest rate is 3%, and that we're leaving the money in for 2 years. Okay, so notice I have written out my interest rate formula, and I'm going to plug in those numbers exactly where they belong. So you're going to do this with me. And we'll go ahead and fill in blue. Okay, so do I know the amount of interest? I'm just writing right below it. And the answer is no, I don't. We can go ahead and make that a question mark. Do I know the amount of P? In this case, I do. They told me it was $225. Probably going to have to make that a little bit smaller. Okay. Do I know the interest rate, the R? Yes, I do. And the interest rate here is 3%. But remember, I cannot put a 3 in there because I have to convert it to a decimal. So 3% as a decimal is 0.03. Okay, and the last thing I need is the time. In this case, it says time is 2 years, and it's actually already in years. So the only thing I have to do is go back and fill that into my formula. So I put a 2 there. Now, the dot on all of these simply just means to multiply. So you're going to work this with me. Go ahead and multiply 225 times 0.03 and then times 2. Okay, when you're done multiplying that, you should have gotten 13.0, or I'm sorry, 13.5. But since we're finding the amount of interest, and we know that this is money, we'll go ahead and put an I here. We know that it's a dollar amount, it's not a rate or anything like that. We don't see money written as 13.5. We see it as written as $13.50. So therefore, this is what this problem actually says. This problem says that if I put in $225 and I earn an interest rate of 3% for 2 years, at the end of those 2 years, the bank will give me $13.50 as interest earned. Pretty cool. Not very much, but nonetheless, it's still cool. I didn't have to do anything other than deposit the money that I had. Okay? Alright, we're going to go on to our next one. Okay, so here's our example number 2. In example number 2, this time it actually gives us the amount of interest that's earned. So we're going to do something a little bit different. We've got interest earned, we've got the principal amount, the amount that we started with, and we have time. But now we need to figure out what is the interest rate that we were paid to get that amount of money. So again, we're going to fill in the amount that we know. So here we go. Let's see if I can get the blue to work this time. Okay, so do we know the interest earned? In this case, yes we do. It was $300. Do we know the amount of principal? The amount that we started with? And yes we do. It was $1,000. Do we know the rate? No, we don't. That's actually what we're trying to solve for. So we're going to put an R in there because it's what we don't know. So we'll just stick a letter in there. It's the only thing that we don't know. And we do have a time, and we know that our time is already in years, so we don't have to do anything fancy to that. So we'll put in a 5. It's 5. Okay, now with this problem, I look and I see, okay, what operations do I know that I can do? What can I already perform? And I look at this problem, and I know that it says on this side of the equation, it says that I'm doing multiplication on everything. Well, I don't know what R is, so I can't really multiply that by 1,000 yet. But I do know that 1,000 times 5 would give me 5,000. I do know that. And 300 stays the same, so I just drop that down. So just bring that straight down. And I still have an R over here, so I'm going to leave that there. So I'm going to say it's still times R. I'll put a multiplication symbol in there. Okay, so now this problem right here, what I've got now, it says 5,000 times a number would give me $300. So if I don't know what I'm multiplying 5,000 by to get 300, I can do the opposite operation. In this case, the opposite of multiplication is what, guys? Correct. It is division. So I'm going to divide both sides. Now what am I going to divide both sides by? Easy enough. I want to figure out what R is, so I want to get R alone. So I'm going to move the $5,000 off of this side. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5,000. Now, I know that when I do 5,000 divided by 5,000, they cancel each other out. And I'm still left with R on this side. So we'll put R down here, even though he's by his lonesome. Now, here's where students make the greatest mistake, is they'll end up putting in their calculator, they'll put 5,000 divided by 300. And that's not the case. You actually have to enter it in your calculator exactly the way that you see it. So we put in 300 in your calculator. Go ahead and do that with me now. And then divide by 5,000. And we get 0.06. Now, here's the only problem. Recall that when we were talking about putting our interest rate in to the formula, we had to do what if it was given as a percent? What was the one thing that we had to do if they gave it to us as a percent? We had to convert it to a decimal. Well, we're going to have to do the same thing when we're solving for rate. So the very last thing I'm going to do to make sure that I'm completely finished is now I've got to turn this decimal back into a percent. So we're going to write ourselves a little note. And I want you to star it, circle it, highlight it, underline it. Be sure to convert this back into a percent. And it's super important. How do we convert a decimal into a percent? We move the decimal 2 places toward the right. And we add the percent sign. So our final answer is 6% is our rate. And then we're done. Okay, so now we're on to problem number 3. And we have a word problem. It says Olivia deposits $7,000 in an account that earns 7% simple interest. About how long will it take for her account balance to reach $8,000? So first, we highlight what we know. We know that she deposited $7,000. She gets 7% in simple interest. And we want to know how long will it take for her account balance to be $8,000. So we have to actually stop and really think about what this is telling us. And we're going to go through here together and point out what we know and fill in what we know. Do we know the amount of interest earned? Well, it doesn't come right out and tell us the amount that is earned, but it tells us that her account balance will be $8,000. So if she started with $7,000, that means she earned how much? That's right. It means she earned $1,000. She deposited $7,000 and her account balance is now $8,000. So, did they give us a principal amount? Yes, they did. The amount that she started with. And that is $7,000.